Today we're going to be selecting the best club of each decade from all the way back in the 1920s up till now, the 2020s that have of course had only 5 years so far. I will apologize in advance because if you hear my voice sounding a little bit dodgy, my nose a little bit iffy, I'm fighting a crazy cold right now, man. So listen, if that ain't worth a sub, I'm still giving you guys your daily vid. I don't know what is. I'm fighting for my life out here, but I said, you know what? I gotta give the people their daily video. So here we are. Apologies if I start bugging out or you start hearing sneezes. Let's tuck in the 1920s. Obviously, it makes sense. We start in England with Huddersfield Town. Now, for those who are unaware, of course, England had the first ever official football league back in 1888, I believe they first founded it, for those of us who do remember. And Herbert Chapman, then of Huddersfield, became the first manager of any English team to win 3 English league titles in a row. So, of course, Huddersfield are going to get it. They were revolutionary in that regard. They dominated. I mean, winning league titles is what it is, right? There was no, Champions League and all this other kind of intercontinental sort of stuff there. So, in the early periods, it's going to be those who dominated their country. And, of course, like we said, the English leagues, they're going to be the first ones that pull up. And like I just said, Herbert Chapman cooking in the 1920s. He then goes to Arsenal in the 1930s and dominates even more over there. Of course, for those of us who do remember those times, he introduced the iconic WM formation that helped them go on to win 5 league titles from obviously 1930 up until 1939 when World War II kicked off. Of course, we do know about them ones there. He found Cliff Baston, I think it was, from Exeter those times. So he was also a bit of a scout himself. Obviously went and had that 33-goal season in 1933, playing again in that kind of basically WM, think of it as like the inverted wingers, that kind of, they're like inside forwards, if you will, right? And then you got that kind of false 9 over there as well. That was all Herbert Chapman, right? He introduced people having shirt numbers and plenty other innovations to do with floodlights and all that kind of stuff. So obviously big up Herbert Chapman. Now we leave England to go to the 1940s. This one, it was a tough one, I'll be honest. Big respect to Torino, but it has to be River Plate over in Argentina. Of course, the iconic La Maquina team. Many people credit this team as being the one that kind of started the whole total football dynasty and whatnot. Of course, people will say as well, they're probably the best club in Argentina's history. Again, they were dominating their league, and now we start to see teams playing abroad a little bit more than obviously, in the 1910s and 20s and 30s and whatnot. So, again, big up to Torino, but I felt as though we had to go to Argentina, who also, by the way, one of the earliest nations, if you will, to start having a football league. During the 1940s, they went on to win a total of 10 trophies. So pretty much, I mean, a trophy a year doesn't really get much better than that when there wasn't, Carabobbins Cup, Calabash Cup, FA Cup, all these things to play for. Winning a trophy a year, that's fantastic. And to make matters, I guess, even better for them, they debuted the king of the 50s, Alfredo Di Stefano, who of course went to Real Madrid, and they dominated the 50s, winning the first 5 ever editions of the Champions League, or European Cup as it was known back then. Obviously, it wasn't just Di Stefano by himself, right? They had the likes of Puskas and co. Paco Gento was going crazy as well. All in all, it was a very strong team. People can argue whether or not they stat padded those Champions League because it was right at the beginning and they had the referees in the pocket or whatever. Like I said, maybe one day I'll do a video on the biggest streaks of all time, because the 1960 penalty against Frankfurt, that's crazy. But obviously, we are speaking about the 50s, where, as far as I'm concerned, their 5 Champions League titles rather were fully merited, if you will. So big up to them. Now, 1960s, we got to show a little bit of love towards Internazionale. I'll be honest, of Italy, they were also very strong, but I have to give it to Santos. Of course, spearheaded by none other than Ore himself, Pele of Brazil. Now, this is why it gets interesting, because many people, when they speak about Pele's goals, listen, don't get me wrong, it's definitely fascinating that, my man scored like 930 goals and counting. Like, you go to Wikipedia, one week it's a certain number, the next week there's more goals. I get that. That's a little bit crazy. However, when people say, oh, you're a stat padding v farmers, I don't buy it. Because you have to remember, this is not the 2010s or 2020s when, let's say, look at the Premier League, right? People say the Premier League is the best league in the world. You might have like 2 or 3 English players max per team or per starting 11. Back in them days, your teams are majority filled by people of your nation. what nation was dominating the World Cups them times? Brazil. So he's playing for a Brazilian team, winning so many league titles, the Brasilia Serie A, but also he was winning the continental titles, the intercontinental titles, and worldwide titles as well. So you cannot say he was playing against farmers when he was playing against arguably the strongest league full of, you know, fellow Brazilians that were fighting for these World Cup spots. So again, big up to Pele, big up to Santos in the 1960s. Over in the 70s, I know many people may make the argument for Bayern here, but I'm afraid it has to go to Johan Cruyff's Ajax, who obviously revolutionized. This was like now the real implementation, if you will, of total football, right? Obviously, they three-pitted the Champions League between 1971, 72, 73. For those of us who remember, and that airplane outside needs to stop because I'm in the middle of talking. I'm in flow state right now. I don't want to start sneezing, and the airplane is just flying over my head. Fair enough. I'm gonna continue anyway. Obviously, Ajax, you know, dominated that sort of early spell there. There are definitely some shots for other teams, like a Liverpool were just about kind of floating in. But I think Liverpool's conversation more so starts in the 80s, which we'll go into now. I think the 80s is a coin flip between Milan and Liverpool, who are just, you know, the aforementioned team. Tough one here because obviously both teams had very controversial scandals, I think we'll call them. Milan, of course, relegated to Serie B at the start, and then they came up and then, you know, started winning again, and they've got their European Cups. Liverpool, I believe it was 1985, got banned for, I'm not going to say what, but if you go and do your research, you know why Liverpool got banned. So it's a bit of a dodgy one, but I think I'm going to go with Saki's Milan, I'll be honest, because obviously I think the players were a little bit more iconic, and to be brutally honest with you, Milan had to get either the 80s or the 90s, and in the end I felt as though I'd rather give them the 80s, because I think the 90s has to go, if it's not going to be Milan, probably to Manchester United. Obviously, the Premier League began in 1992. Everyone knows that. It's when the Premier League, to be fair, it wasn't immediately, you know, the best league in the world. Far from it. I think it took a few years to, you know, basically when Sky Sports bought the Premier League in 1992, there was like that kind of exponential growth in it, where by the end of the 90s and 2000s and whatnot, that's when the Premier League is now starting to become, okay, this is a very serious league. You know, the start of the 2000s, now they're really on it. And I feel as though United's, you know, stranglehold, if you will, over the Premier League, where only obviously Blackburn got a cheeky title, and then Arsene Wenger came to disrupt United's flow. But even still, United stat-padded so many league titles. I say stat-padded as if it's a bad thing. I don't mean that as in a negative way. I mean as in they just kind of monopolized the league, where they got so many league titles, and of course ended the 90s decade with a treble as well. So I think Sir Alex Ferguson, you got to give him the 90s. But I can hear arguments for giving Milan the 90s and Liverpool the 80s. It's, I guess, a question of what you think was more iconic. The 90s, nah. I think I'm going to keep it as I've got it right now. I think United will take the 90s. Or to be fair, you can give it back-to-back Milan if you want to. I really wouldn't have any issue with that whatsoever. We go to the 2000s. I think the 2000s is one of the easier ones for me personally, because you look at it and you think, who are the best players in the world during, you know, the 2000s decade? I'd argue the first half of the 2000s, you're competing between Ronaldinho and Henry. So let's say Ronaldinho, because he won a Ballon d'Or as well in the 2000s. And the second half is between Messi and Ronaldo, obviously. So two Barcelona players have been the top of each half of that decade. I think it makes sense, right? Of course, they won the Champions League in 2006. They had an iconic team in 2009. It makes sense that Barcelona should take the 2000s. Now, 2010s. This is where people may get angry. It might be, you know, a lot of furious people in the comments. I believe one of the classical teams should take this one. So, I'll be honest, I understand how crazy, you know, Barca were in 2014, 2015. But guys, I'm not sure we're going to see a team in the modern era three-peat the Champions League again. I'll be honest. And that, you know, people spoke about, oh, you man was stat padding in the 1950s or whatever. They went and bagged multiple Champions League in the 2010s. One of the most sort of strong periods, if you will, in world football. They went and won it 3 times on the spin. And as far as I'm concerned, once you get past like the 1980s to 90s, the Champions League becomes, you know, the holy grail as like the main trophy that you want to win. Obviously, the league is important too, and the league is your bread and butter. It shows you who the best team is. So obviously, winning the league multiple times definitely has an impact. But I think Real Madrid's global pull, if you will, sort of just superseded Barca beyond your wildest imaginations. And that is why for the 2020s, guys, I've also gone with Real Madrid. Another couple Champions Leagues, and they are now officially, well, I say officially, there's no factual metric, but they are by far and away the biggest club in the world now. They've consolidated it. You know, they're winning league titles, they're winning Champions Leagues as well. They're bringing the best players and making them see out their contracts to bring them for another airplane of... Bro, where's everyone flying, bro? At 8:38 p.m, where's everyone flying? The Traitors episode is going to be at 9 p.m. Where are you going? Let the airplane go by. Let me continue with what I was saying. So yeah, like I said, Madrid, biggest team in the world. I think you could slightly make a case-ish for Man City of the 20s maybe, because they kind of monopolized the Premier League at the time. But at the same time, well, obviously Liverpool just won it, and they have won Champions League as well, City, whereas obviously Madrid have a couple Champions League. So again, it just depends how you view it. For me, in the first, like, let's say 1920s to like 60s and 70s, it's obviously league titles, because the European thing, people were not rating it as much, or rather it didn't even exist in the 20s, 30s and 40s. But nowadays, I think everyone looks at the Champions League and says, you know what, that's the big boy one, that's the one you want to win. So I think it's fair to give that one to Madrid. But again, you know, let me know your thoughts. Any other decades? I know for some of you this was a bit of an education, like a history lesson, if you will, because you were not there like I was in the 1920s. Actually, you know, the Huddersfield game, I was actually one of the stewards that day when they lifted the second title, and it was an incredible day. I couldn't believe it. And I was there when Arsenal had the first televised game as well, against the Arsenal reserves it was back then. So that was a really special moment for me. I didn't get any photographs, unfortunately, because I couldn't afford a camera back then. But there we are. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Again, apologies, I sound terrible, I know. My throat is gone, my nose is gone, but I'm here for you guys. So road to 50k. We're flying up, guys. We hit 45, so big love for that one. I'm hoping tomorrow will be the charity match vlog, but there's a chance that I don't do it, I can't lie, because today I've barely done any work, bro. I haven't edited nothing. I literally was in bed till like 1 p.m, but I'm here now. So big respect to you guys. I'll catch you lot tomorrow for whatever it may be. Like if you are happy that club football is back. In a bit. Bosh.